internet. I'm like waiting on it. I'm not sure. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to believe. And it's that lull. All right, it's telling me we're alive. It's telling me the internet has given us another day. But you guys know me, until I see it, I don't believe it. I've seen it. I have seen it. How about that? I've seen it and it is good. Ah, that's just beautiful. That's just beautiful. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. Hitting you East Coasters first. Good afternoon. Good evening, if it's evening where you're at. Good morning, if you're in my time zone. It's morning. Welcome to my morning show, Get Your News On with Ron. I know you might be thinking, Ron, it's 11 a.m., but you guys know me. I'm a comedian. This is very early for me, and I've been doing this a while now. So good morning. And if you're coming at us from the future, Australia, what's up? Did we make it another day? Did you guys solve climate change for the rest of us? You're in the future. How are we? Guys, it's a little cooler here in Southern California. I'll make a quick announcement. It's a little cooler here in Southern California. And I usually measure the first day of winter based on whenever Lucy, my cat Lucy, voluntarily gets under the blankets. And she did that this morning. But it's not even November yet. I think she was just messing with me. I think because, we have our morning routine where she's like, hey, get up and feed me. And I go, no, it's not time yet. We still got about an hour. Chill. And she goes, well, I'll wait, but I'm not going to chill. And I'm like, that's okay. I kind of like it this way. And then she just purrs and she gets all up in my face. And, we kind of do it back and forth for an hour. I'll toss and turn. She'll just follow me. That's our thing. I like it. But this morning she got under the blankets and I was like, really? Already? I did the thing where I'm like, you want under the, and she was like, yeah. And I'm like, really? Oh, it's not even November. I think she was just I think she was like, he'll get up sooner if I do this. But anyway, it might be winter. It might not be. I'm not sure. My cat dictates the seasons for me. Also, shout out to the people who make this show possible. ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules. You can get their tea wholesale now because of the pandemic. They supply the tea to get your news on with Ron. The Chinese white peach tea is amazing. It's so freaking good. I had some last night. Such a soothing tea. You guys know the raspberry pecan is one of my favorites. There's a monk's blend tea. It's a very smoky black tea. It's a Japanese tea. Phenomenal. You can get their tea wholesale. Makes it a wonderful holiday gift, by the way. ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules. Our friends over at Triage Oil, TRIAGE oil.com. They make topical pain oil you put on your body. You guys know that I use it all the time. It's a cannabis-based pain oil. It has done wonders for my neck. Trendy Nay has been educating the public on cannabis issues for a long time with his show. Check it out, triageoil.com, TRIAGE oil.com. Without further ado, my guest today, I'm excited to talk to this guy. I heard him speak recently at a Zoom event, and he was an attorney, and now he's running for office, and he's running for District 34. Please welcome to the show, Mr. David Kim. David, what's up, buddy?
Yes. Hi, Ron. Thank you so much for having me.
So thanks for being here. I want to get into your story a fair amount. So I want to start at the beginning. On your website, you mentioned that you were an attorney and you also had you've done some work in the music industry. And you said you wrote a book to help artists avoid getting ripped off. And I got to ask you, as a comedian myself, where can I get that freaking book, buddy? Where can I get that book so I don't get ripped off?
Yeah, well, Ron, if you are interested in doing film and TV acting, then yes, get that book.
I'm on it.
Okay, because the book is titled "The Film and TV Actor's Pocket Lawyer." So what I noticed was, at the time when I was working 2 to 3 jobs, doing that whole grind and hustle myself, because at that time paid legal jobs were so scarcity, and so I was working free as an attorney, then juggling driving for Lyft and Uber. But as I was doing that, I noticed that a lot of actor friends, a lot of writer friends, a lot of creative friends were paying their attorneys these $10,000 retainers or mixed retainers plus percentages and per dollar per hour. And I thought, why are you guys getting ripped off like that? And you're asking me for free legal help. And so that was my sort of kind of fall through into entertainment law. And the more I got to learn and be well versed in it, the more I realized, oh my gosh, you guys are being taken advantage of. Let's stop this. Let's nip it in the butt. And so I went ahead and wrote the Film and TV Actors Pocket Lawyer. So if you're an actor and you get a pilot deal or a movie deal or a contract or a special guest appearance, or you're in a new web series and you don't have the money to get an attorney, and this book will let you look out for what areas to be mindful of and what to negotiate and realize what are the standards and parameters. That way you can avoid paying an attorney $2,000 to look over like a 3-page deal memo. So yeah, so that's the key. And after we started seeing other law practices like Counsel for Creators. When you go on Yelp or Google, there's a lot of more creative law practices now that are now focused more on creatives instead of just the money now. So yeah, I'm glad that we were able to, I was able to help out at that. But currently I'm an immigration attorney, Ron, as I don't know if you pointed that out, but I'm currently an immigration attorney. I defend respondents in immigration court when they receive their notice to appear for removal. So I advocate for their extended stay here, or for asylum, or for any other means for them to stay here, and also documentation as permanent residents for DACA recipients as well. And so I'm taking a pause in my career because I just feel like we're in urgent times, and people from our communities need to be running for office. So thank you for having me.
So you basically chose to use your powers for good. You have a law degree, and you could have been very charitable and helped out some of these poor corporations that are just trying to destroy our planet and wreck the environment. You could have done that, but you were like, I'm going to be a little more selfish here and help out creatives and immigrants. I'm doing something for me, right?
Yeah. And then some people are like, oh, David, like, what do you mean? You're a hotshot lawyer and like you probably have lots of money. No, the reality was I was working as a labor and employment attorney 60 hours a week on $2,000 a month, not being able to pay for rent. And so I had to do extra jobs. And then doing that hustle, I knew what it was like. And to think, when we think of people like, oh, actor, Angelina Jolie, oh, actor, so-and-so, whoever's rich. But no, when we think actor here, it's like somebody with 2 or 3 jobs really trying to make ends meet, but never getting a chance to because they're always working. So they don't even start to pursue their dream. So that's what really affected me to the core.
Totally. And if they do work full time, they're basically one ripoff away from not being able to make rent, because it's like, oh, they didn't get the residuals they should have. They got screwed over on this deal, and now they're not really getting the payout they deserve for their work. And gee, they're kind of just getting by because it's a tough industry. There's a big world between community theater and Angelina Jolie, as you put it. There's
Exactly.
a big, wide world. And that's the case in music. That's the case in comedy. Yeah, you know how it goes. All right, so let's get into, you decided to run for office. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, so during my time just kind of doing the whole grind and hustle so I moved to Los Angeles in 2010
From where?
I went to law school in New York. So
Okay.
I went to Yeshiva Law School. Cardozo is the name of the law school, but it's part of the Yeshiva University. So I went to law school there, but I actually grew up all along the West Coast. I was born in Arizona, grew up in Washington State, then moved to NorCal, and then for college, and then law school, and then settled here in 2010. But during my years here, it was really based on my experiences here, connecting with people, meeting hundreds and hundreds of clients, and doing the whole grind and hustle for 8 to 9 years of the 10 years here, that I realized, oh my gosh, life isn't supposed to be this tough, where you're continuously working, giving, and you don't still see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it was in 2017 where I just started becoming more aware and thinking, you know what, something's wrong here. Like, it's not about us, like something's systemically wrong. And that's where I started to get more politically engaged, and started to was able to finally factualize or put it concretely recognize the things that I was feeling, in the sense of recognizing the fact that we're in a 35+ year income wage stagnation with increasing widening wealth gaps, and even more so during this pandemic, when we've seen the biggest transfers of wealth to the privileged few and wealthy at the top, to the military industrial complex, to defense contractors. And so kind of looking at all of this, it made me think, whoa, I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's the government, and it's not one, because the matter of fact is the government is not set up to help the people right now, and that's not a conspiracy theory. That's a reality that's happening in front of our eyes, and you can see that when people aren't able to pay for their medical expenses, for their basic expenses, for their rent, for their food, because there are no jobs. I mean, pre-COVID, people were living paycheck to paycheck. At least 70% of us were. Now, millions don't have health care insurance. Millions don't have a job or money to pay rent, and so. With that being said, it was really during my involvement in Kenneth Mejia's campaign. So Kenneth Mejia ran for U.S. Congress in our district 2 years ago.
He's a friend of the show. We've had him on a couple times. I like Kenneth. He's a good
Oh,
guy.
nice. Oh,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Kenneth's a good dude.
I love Kenneth. Yeah, Kenneth, I call him my godfather. And he lets me call him that because I fell into this rabbit hole. I was sitting just minding my own business, doing my grind. And I got a text and it said, "Hi, I'm Kenneth Mejia and I'm fighting for a Green New Deal, universal health care, student debt cancellation." I was like reading and I thought, okay, you're younger, but damn, you're so bold. I love it. These are the issues that we really need to fight for. And to me, it didn't seem like a pie in the sky thing, but really issues that would really help all of our lives in so many different ways. And so I fell down this rabbit hole helping out on his campaign. I ended up, helping out a lot. Unfortunately, he lost, but he did really well. There's less than 1% registered as green in our district, and our district is predominantly a Bernie district, which is great. And so Kenneth, even though there's less than 1% registered as green, he managed to win 28% of the total vote of the general election, and that's a lot. It shows you that almost a third of Democratic voters didn't even vote for their own elected official, who's a Democrat. And to me, that showed a lot of things. And Kenneth, I mean, he already ran a couple times and he was just too burnt out to run again. And I had no intent or thought to run at all, even when he ended. But as I was watching the debates last year, as I was organizing and in my community, serving on neighborhood council, doing the local organizing work that I was doing, and watching the presidential primary debates last year, I thought, oh my gosh, there's no better time than now to run because people are desperate. People need help right now. Being activated by people like Nina Turner, Marianne, like Bernie, like just all these different great individuals and leaders, that's where something turned on in me. And so I remember last year, I thought, okay, this is so crazy, but I'm gonna file my papers to run for Congress right now because it's so needed right now. And so that was about in July of last year. And now it's October 28th and we're about 15, 16 months in. So yeah, a lot has happened, but we have now 6 days left, and we're really trying to get the word out, Ron, because we're fighting for, we're 100% people powered, 100% grassroots. What that means for people watching is we don't take any corporate PAC money, and what that and corporate PAC money from private prisons, from military defense contractors, from pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies, payday lenders, student debt collectors, banks, developers. We don't take any of that money because if you do, then you're representing and prioritizing corporate interests over the people, because once you get into office, your worry is about getting reelected. And if you don't get reelected, then that's obviously a big thing for your career. And the reason, the one way that they get reelected is taking the corporate PAC money, because the reality is whoever has the most money, whoever's able to raise the most corporate money wins an election. And so what our opponent is doing, he's washing us away with mailers right now. He's already sent 8 mailers in the span of a week and a half. And so in that sense, it's something that we really need to change. But the fact that when I'm elected and because we're people powered, once I get into office, it's disruptive to the world of politics, because I don't have to worry about kissing ass or sucking up to corporate interests or to the few people at the top of the party leadership, because I'm not afraid of corporate PAC money being pulled for me or whatnot, because I wasn't elected by corporate money. I was elected by the people. And so that's why a people powered movement is so disruptive, because there's nothing to hook us on. And Tulsi talks about this in her interview with Joe Rogan, in one of them, and that's the hook that they can't hook us with. And so I think now it's really a time for us to really elect people who are people powered, who really stand for issues that are affecting the community. And so we're fighting for giving every American a floor to stand on. If an elected official says that they care for the people, that they care about us, then they can't just say it in lip service. They need to act it out. So my opponent, he says, oh, I fight for Medicare for All, I'm a co-sponsor. Yeah, okay, so since you've been a co-sponsor, what have you done? Your pharmaceutical companies and healthcare company donors, their best interests are far away from Medicare for All. What have you done? Have you actually talked about it? Have you put up a press conference? What are the other ways you're fighting for it? Or did you sign on because a majority of the House Democrats, because at least 105 Democrats in the beginning signed on, and it would be politically expedient to do so? Why did you? And so these are the moves and things that we need to analyze. Why are you saying you're fighting for free college when you take money from Navient, the nation's largest student debt collector? And so kind of in these things, it's just for us to really catch on. And so that's why the lip service, that's why the empty campaign promises continue to happen. And so we're fighting to give every American a floor to stand on with universal basic income, Medicare for All, Homes Guarantee, Green New Deal, clean campaign finance reform, which is key. And there's other ways we can address that before overturning Citizens United. And then also immigration reform and a responsive representative bill. So until we get clean campaign finance reform, and I'll close it with this, Ron, as part of that platform policy, is before we get clean campaign finance reform, one of the ways we can get our elected officials to be held accountable is requiring that they hold office hours, requiring that they hold mandatory town halls at least once a quarter. That's the very minimum. We'll be doing it more frequently than that, letting our constituents know about what legislation we'll be voting on instead of after the fact, where they sort of tend to now report back to us thinking that's okay and just answering Q&As and sufficing it as that. But no, that's not what co-governance is, because the House used to be one where people like you and me could just run for office, serve, and then go back to our regular lives and our occupations. And that's what the House used to be. But now it's just become a political industrial complex. And so, yeah, that's why I'm running, Ron.
All right. So let me just ask you a kind of strategic question really quick.
Yeah.
And then I want to get more issue heavy here. But you mentioned you have experience on neighborhood council. What made you decide you want to go Congress versus, say, something like city council or something like that? Like, what made you pick Congress?
Yeah, well, in the terms of we have a lot of great progressive leaders on different ballot candidates across the country, and here in LA we have Nithya Raman, who's running for city council in CD4. She's amazing. If you live in Los Angeles, she's great. Check her out. We have Godfrey, who's running for state assembly, Fatima, who's running for state assembly, Angelica Congress. I'm doing name drop. Constantine Burbank City Council. Well, for the district that I live in, Gil Cedillo is still in office, I mean, I could have waited 2 years and ran for that spot, or perhaps the state assembly, but state assembly, Godfrey's got it. I hope he wins and he would be my representative if he wins, Godfrey. But I think in the sense of, because of what Representative Ocasio-Cortez has shown and done for us, in the sense of the urgency of how many people, how much more we need to quote unquote expand the squad, or actually have people that represent the people's interests and are fighting for the people's interests in Congress. That's what Representative Ocasio-Cortez and some other recent Congress representatives, like Representative Ilhan Omar and others, have shown us how, like, in the sense that our leaders haven't really been standing for us as they could be, and as notably as they should be doing. And so it's inspired and empowered probably a record number of down ballot congressional candidates running for office all across the country. So it's not just reflective of LA. We have people all over the country, in New York, in Florida, in all states, running for office, pushing for change, because it's building upon this realization, a deeper awareness of, hey, it's not normal to wake up every day in deep-rooted chronic economic anxiety, wondering if I'm okay for the next month or 2 months financially. That's not supposed to be normal life. And I think the American people, the masses of us, are recognizing that. And so we're slowly waking up and realizing, hey, yes, we can make local change in our local offices and races. Kind of particularly with the circumstances that I have, it was in the sense of, hey, there's also a desperate urgency and need in Congress right now as well, because we have so many. Now you can't tell the difference between a corporately funded Democrat and a corporately funded Republican anymore, because they basically vote for the same thing. And in the sense of, when it comes to really putting your money where their mouth is, we could be allocating resources and money to the people right now, but we're not. And what's the cause of that? And so until we get more people-powered candidates in Congress, like nothing's really going to change. And so that probably is one of the first and foremost reasons, Ron. The second would be in terms of what races were available. And then third, just the condition that we're in as a country. I feel that there should be more people that have this ownership mentality and not this kind of, oh, this is going to be my next career, and then after this I'm going to do this seat, like my opponent who's already filed for lieutenant governor race of 2026 for California. So in the sense of we this desperate urgency of where our country's going, because we really need a FDR's New Deal again right now, because it's gone so bad. We haven't had an external world conflict like World War II since World War II that's really affected our country inside and out. And so the reason why we're here is because we've let our elected officials lead us this way. And so, yeah, so for those reasons stated, Ron.
Well, do you think that there are some serious structural issues that are leading to this? I mean, I think that the way you're describing our contemporary electoral politics is 100% right on. And I think a lot of that is because of the systemic way that it works. It really does. It attracts a very mediocre person most of the time, because not only does being a blank suit who just takes the corporate money, not only is that smiled upon, in many cases, it's pretty much mandatory, because if you really get in there to fight the good fight, you eventually get screwed over or redistricted, or worse, just ask someone like a Dennis Kucinich. And, you know, David, I'm not telling you anything you don't know here, but the Democratic establishment spent $50 million to try to make sure people like you don't win, to try to make sure grassroots candidates don't win. So I think, recognizing these systemic issues is important. What are some ways that we can really combat that?
Yeah, well, and what plays to, I mean, unfortunately, what plays to our to our empowerment and motivation to go further and to fight harder is the fact of the horrible conditions that we have now. And I'm not. And when people get to know me, and Ron, you'll probably say this too later, but when people get to know me, I am the most optimistic, positive, always smiling type of guy. I don't know if you could already tell now, but I mean, except moments where I get really just angry at certain things that the government's doing. But besides that, I'm really positive. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but the reality also is that our district is one of the poorest out of the 435 congressional districts. We're the 5th lowest in education. We have over 40,000 brothers and sisters living unhoused in our city alone. And so with these things in mind, I think the people are groaning. They're looking for help, but they're not finding it. So one, we have that. The actual conditions, people are wanting change. Like, it's inevitable right now. They no people don't trust the government. When you're calling people to get out the vote, immediately when they find out you're a candidate, they hang up. They're so jaded, not interested. There's no trust in government whatsoever. And so a lot of people are looking for new change. They're looking for people who will be fighters, people who haven't been in career politicians. And I think that works in our favor in the sense of people are looking for change. Number two, we live in a time and age where everything's digital and easily shareable, and you can't play the same tricks on us. For example, like 20 years, if you were the type of person sending out 8 mailers with pictures of Senator Sanders and Representative Ocasio-Cortez's pictures and quotes on your mailers as if they endorsed you, it might have been hard to combat that. But as those things, like, we can talk about it online, and it's circulated and disseminated a lot faster. And so I think for us as grassroots campaigns, what we can, although we don't have the money, we have so much more in terms of energy, passion, power, vision, values, volunteers. I remember, Ron, I was sharing this with our team of volunteers earlier. I remember back in the primary cycle when it was 5 candidates in December, January, when I was sign waving, it was myself on the intersection, and I was jumping up for hand waves and honks. But now
you had your own Pete Buttigieg dance. You were just doing it yourself.
Yeah, and so, but now we have, Ron, and I'm so thankful. Now we have 200 plus people volunteering for us, and whether it be phone banking, text banking, sign waving, website tech, in whichever ways, like we have 200 volunteers helping us, and I think during this pandemic, yes, it threw us off and it veered us off course when it started, because after we won second, we were set up with our whole campaign plan, but COVID hit and we just immediately moved towards community relief efforts. And but despite that, that's where we were able to build community stronger. We have volunteers within the district, out of the district. And so it's been really great. And so kind of reminding us and reminding them that, hey, we have the passion, fire, energy, hearts of so many people fighting for this campaign, and then the bigger movement, whether it be Angelica's campaign, Shahid's campaign, whoever's congressional campaign, Liam's, since he was on the Zoom chat as well. Like, we're the 4 congressional if I'm leaving out somebody, I apologize, but I believe we're the 4 congressional.
I can't remember everyone all the time.
Yeah, I believe we're the 4 progressional California congressional candidates: Shahid, myself, Angelica, and Liam. As far as the new candidates, I mean, there are other Congress representatives who are progressive, like Rokana, but in terms of new candidates who are running, and so I think it's very hopeful and empowering for us. And so the ways to help and combat is just to share about us. If you have family or friends living in CD34, let them know. I think what we're doing right now, Ron, every day we wake up and we kind of are pivoting because our opponent's doing some weird tactic campaign. Like yesterday, he sent out a text blast to Korean constituents in our district saying that one of the major Korean newspapers, Korea Daily, endorsed him, but it's not true, and I verified it with Korea Daily yesterday. And so he's doing things like that, throwing off our Korean constituents off track, telling them that he was endorsed. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, that's an outright lie. It's not even misleading, it's an outright lie. And so so we're just kind of dealing with those things that the establishment is doing. But it's okay though. We're still very hopeful and positive, and we're going to continue with that hopeful, positive message.
Have you had any direct interactions with your opponent? Like, have you guys debated or anything like that?
No debate. I mean, we've requested a debate before, but no response. And so,
Of course.
yeah, I mean, we would love to have a debate, but I think it's important for the people to hear who their candidates are and what they stand for, and be able to make the decision for themselves instead of being bombarded with all this campaign stuff. And that's also something that I really want to work on after getting into Congress. Before we can overturn Citizens United, there are other ways in terms of expenditures, in terms of setting the number of, there's no reason any candidate should be sending 8 mailers in a week to 300,000 voters. That's a waste of paper. That's that's a couple million copies out there. But in that sense, I think what's very the deeper, and I feel like I'm like a Marianne. I remember her saying this when she was running for the presidential primaries last year. The deeper she gets into it, the more she realizes everything's messed up, and it's kind of the same for me, I realize. But I think that shouldn't deter us at all. I think that motivates us to go further into it all. To give you some perspective, Ron, it cost me last primary cycle $20,000 to put a 250-word statement in the ballot booklet, in the sample ballot booklet. $20,000.
Wow.
So there's no way like somebody, it's just it's set against us for anybody from the community to really run, unless you really have money. And so I think we're entering a time, and I'm very hopeful that it's a time where the tides will now start changing, where we'll be able to deflate the influence of money on politics, because that's the first and biggest step that we need right now. But with that, we still need to work on other issues that the people really need help with.
Well, what's the biggest all-encompassing solution for that? Because I mean, you know, Citizens United, of course, needs to be overturned. I'm for that 110%. However, a lot of people forget that just gets us back to the way it was in the early 2000s. Like, overturning Citizens United, it's important, but I mean, I would say you got to go a big step further, and it needs to be completely publicly funded elections with only small dollar donors and a limited amount of what they can give.
Yeah, so something like a publicly, this is funny. I'm laughing honestly, and I'm not doing it out of a lower than thing, but to me, it just doesn't make sense. My opponent is for public funded elections too, but yet he takes more corporate PAC money than a majority of Republicans in Congress. So I kind of smile when I think of that. But yeah, no, we need to go towards publicly funded elections, and there's different ways we can do that. One of the ways that we're exploring it is through democracy dollars, something that Andrew Yanghart proposed before, where every American and of course we're still. We definitely need to move towards public funding and financing of elections. And how do we do that? And how do we best implement that? I think is the next crucial step that we need to discuss. One of the ways is democracy dollars, where every American is given 100 democracy dollars. And from that, they're able to donate $10 to David Kim's campaign, $5, $20 to Nithya's campaign, and whatnot in that sense, where even with us, with grassroots campaigns, do we like asking our constituents or people, individuals, for money when people are hurting right now as well? No. And so I think to really lessen the whole, to not only will we eliminate the impact of corporate money washing out elections, but then also helping our communities and constituents as well with publicly funding those as well. And I think with that, you'll have a better outcome of focus, of attention. People will be able to better focus and be more informed on how they vote. And why don't we have public debates that are a requirement? Why don't we have all those things that can make our representatives more responsible and be held more accountable? And so I think it's also a more integrative approach in terms of that, and also defining on in other areas like what certain expenditures are allowable or not allowable. And defining that more, because there's a lot of gray areas in the FAC rules. So yeah, there's definitely different ways that we can start with that, and it's not just about overturning Citizens United.
So you're for a UBI, which I'm for a UBI too. I support it, but for me, there's kind of an asterisk there, because I think that one of the things that really needs to accompany a UBI is extensive rent control and just other price ceilings. So it's not, okay, people have this sum of money with no actual exchange going on. We're just going to pump up the rent however much, or we're just going to pump up this however much. So I think there needs to be some accompaniment there. It can't just be a UBI with nothing else. And I'm also, and you know, some people are in this camp, some people aren't, but I support both a federal jobs guarantee and a UBI, because guess what? We can afford them both.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, for sure we can. And I don't think the two are mutually exclusive at all.
I don't either. A lot of people make it out like they are, and that's never really made sense to me. And I've always been like, because they're like, oh, you're for a federal jobs guarantee, so you're not for a UBI. And it's like, no, I'm for both. I'm for both. I just want them both unrolled properly.
Yeah, whatever we can help the people with, because in terms of what is going to happen faster, we don't know at this point. And I think it's really working on an integrative, holistic, working together in different ways in different areas. And so with that being said, I think it ties back to your question of, well, before I go back to the first question, your second question of UBI, like, yeah, it would be great. There's going to be a time, even my legal industry is being automated right now. There's going to be more attorneys without jobs and $200,000 in law school loan debt, more and more. And so what are we going to be doing about that? What are we going to be doing about the jobs that are already being taken away? And so we do need to really deal with reality and not just bury our heads into the sand with that. And there's going to be a time where a basic income is going to be even more. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not needed now, because we're in a 35+ year income wage stagnation, but in the sense of, the basic income, whichever amount it's going to be right now, realistically is not going to be enough for us. And so we do need jobs with living wages. The people need help with that. And so there's no way it should be mutually exclusive. But then tied with your question on UBI, yes, there is the concern of, hey, what if landlords just raise the rent? And that's why I think that's the thing that a lot of people need to realize, elected officials and candidates who are running right now. What is the most that we spend our rent and salary on? I mean, not rent. What is the most we spent? I gave it away. What is the most we spent our salary and income on? It's on rent and mortgage, a majority of our income. We have 40+ million renting households in America. Over 20 million of them are paying over a third of their income on rent. Over 12+ million, and these are outdated numbers. These are numbers before, like a year, 2-year-old numbers, and 12+ million of them are paying more than half of their income. It's a lot worse now. And so what are we doing? And I hope Trump does not win, and I'm not yeah, and Trump should not win. But why is it that even our own presidential candidates aren't really putting a focus on housing as much as they should be? Because housing is a human right. Why aren't we talking about that? And the fact that for us here in Los Angeles, the lack of affordable housing is a grim reality that is forcing a lot of people to live unhoused on the streets. And so coupled with that, we need to pass a homes guarantee. And it's already a bill sitting in the House, drafted by Representative Omar, and in there, and it was spearheaded by People's Action and great base from which it sprung forth from. But a homes guarantee would protect. It has many different plans, whether it be building out social housing units, adding improvements to current federal housing, where $70 billion plus need to be improved in federal housing, but hasn't been. But in addition to that, there will be a lot more tenant protections as well. Why don't we have a tenant's bill of rights? Why aren't we talking about how rent is paid and the conditions and things that tenants must have? Because right now it's a completely unequal bargaining power that the landlords have. And I'm not saying that all landlords are bad. There's a lot of good landlords, but in the sense of our tenants, we're not thinking about our constituents when they're also the majority, and they could be getting help with that. And so setting rent control, setting rent standards, setting a tenant's bills of rights. These are things that we need to talk about and help pass and integrate when we're passing basic income, when we're passing these different intersectional policies. So everything goes hand in hand, Ron, and they all must be carefully done. So it's not just rolling out this and disregarding everything else. But
well, the one thing you never hear is you never hear, and of course, I'm not going to like overgeneralize and say like, oh, all landlords are bad. Of course, I have no basis to make a statement like that. But, you never hear a lot of the basic disinformation being squelched by anybody on the other side of it. I have yet to hear one landlord in my life, and I hope maybe they're out there somewhere, that says, hey, you know what? Rent control doesn't mean I don't have a financially sustainable venture anymore. It doesn't mean I lose. That's not what rent control is. That's wrong. Rent control actually leads to a better society for everybody. You never hear landlords saying that.
Yeah. And I mean, and then for those in California, there's obviously state measures concerning that you can vote on 21. And wherever you live, look for the issues that would bring so much change and meaningful impact and positive change to your communities and help empower. Because I really think that the government's job and our job as the people when we're voting is to find and vote for candidates, platforms, measures that will help our people thrive equally and fairly in all areas. And how do we do that? And instead of allowing the suffering of our people continue. So yeah, I completely agree.
This is where I'm a little I'm a little more radical, David, and you don't have to agree with this, because if you do, it might squash your chances of winning. But I actually think we need to. I think that private property should just straight up be illegal. I think that, and when I say that, I don't mean you don't have possession of something. I don't mean this is my shirt. What I mean is that housing, it should be designated a human right. And the only way to accomplish that is to just eliminate private property as we know it. I know that's not a change I'm going to see in my lifetime. I know that. But I think that's the only way to really get there. Can we do other things to make it better in the interim? Of course we can. And I really want to see those things happen. But I think as a society, we are just so far gone that's the only way we could ever guarantee housing for everyone. That's like the only way. You don't have to agree. Because if you do, your opponent will grab this soundbite if you agree with me. This is why I can never run for office.
Yeah, well, I mean, the comment that I will make
is that your ride? Do you have to go?
No. The comment that I will make is Thomas Paine, one of the early leaders of our country, he actually thought that the whole idea of land ownership was a little absurd, because before before whoever came over to what we know as mainland America right now, we had different communities already living here with our different indigenous people and communities there, and before them the land was already here. So this private land ownership was absurd for him, and so he developed and championed this idea of, well, I don't know if he developed it, but he championed this idea of a land endowment tax fund into which landowners would pay essentially what would fund a UBI, and that UBI would then be distributed to all Americans. And so with that being said, like those, what are the different ways where we can think outside of the box and really help each other while other people perhaps might want to build their own or whatnot. And so so it's not something that it's not something, it's not a first time thing that I'm hearing, Ron. So no need to think that you're completely like off the charts or anything. But in terms of like, and there's different ways we can talk about zoning policies and figure out how do we remove exclusionary zoning policies and allow for more affordable housing to even be possible, to allow for more to focus our communities on being more pedestrian focused instead of being car focused, because that's a huge disadvantage for different communities who aren't able to have the finances to do a single car ride type of trip for everything that they need. And so yeah, so I mean, you've kind of dipped into different intersectional issues that are related to that, so I can see why.
So you mentioned a Green New Deal. I mean, one of the things where we're talking about the intersections, in particular, the intersection of a UBI and a jobs guarantee, a real Green New Deal is going to come with a whole sea of jobs, pun intended, because we need to save those seas. But so speak to your thoughts on a Green New Deal.
Yeah, well, a Green New Deal right now, in terms of, it's not just and of obviously saving the environment, reversing climate change, really moving towards electrical grid, moving to carbon free as fast as we can, and really laying down the infrastructure of how we can move forward, because right now everything that we're doing is inefficient. Yes, it'll cost a chunk, but what we're doing right now and what we'll continue doing will cost even more. The damage that we're doing with our the forest fires and climate change disasters that we have, that cost millions and billions in terms of addressing and responding to, or even with heat islands here in Los Angeles, we have so many of them. And yet we don't even have any cooling centers that are available for our senior population or for our other communities or for our unhoused communities. We're not even focusing on that. And so if we're not even focusing on that, at least we can be focusing on different ways. And that means ensuring that we have infrastructure and buildings. And the only reason I'm looking out of the window, Ron, is because I'm looking at the buildings and it's like,
No, it's because those sirens were coming for you. We know what's really going on.
These buildings are not, they need to be more environmentally friendly and sustainable and keeping our cooling in, and there's ways that we can do it. And so a Green New Deal is definitely where we need to be moving and pushing towards and fighting for, and in all areas. And despite Biden being against fracking or whatever, I mean being for fracking and not being against it, I mean, despite that, like, we still need to push harder. I feel like this administration will be a good transition administration for us to finally be able to have time to think, finally have time to recollect our thoughts, and to be able to now strategize of what we need to continue pushing forward for. So that's something that I'll be still continuing to be fighting for, and in ways of again, how can we, while we fight for a Green New Deal and fight for massive change, what are some other ways we can still get there too? There's bills like, I don't know the exact title, I think it's the Carbon and Dividend Exchange or whatever Act, but it's like bills like that, where you're implementing a carbon dividend, a carbon tax, to encourage and move us away from carbon, and using that money and funding families and communities. That's another way to fund a UBI type of resource and allocation of funding towards our families and communities. And so in different ways, it's definitely something that we need to be pushing for and fighting for. And when you're voting in the election, if you haven't already voted, look for where your candidate starts on that, and see if your candidate has funding from that industry. Because if they do, then odds are that they're not really pushing or fighting for it, and it's just another thing listed on their platform to get reelected or to get elected.
Well, and it's got to happen from the bottom up, big time. I mean, you can talk about. I mean, you got to recognize things for what they are. Joe Biden, his whole like, oh, by 2050, you got to sniff that out for what it really is. And what it really is just saying, hey, I'm going to make the next generation deal with it. When you're saying 2050, that's way too late. That's way too little, way too late. He knows that. Scientists knows that. He's just saying, you know what? I will at least acknowledge this is a real thing. That's something Trump won't do. I'll at least acknowledge it's real, but I'm just going to, someone else can deal with it. So, it's going to take a movement from the ground up to say that's not good enough, to say that is not enough. We need a real Green New Deal, and fracking needs to be banned. It needs to be done so. And I know that we don't have that leadership at the federal and state level right now. We don't even have that here in California. Gavin Newsom, he's smiling. Yeah. I mean, he's smiling, holding an electric car charge. Hey, we're all going to be on electric cars by 2035. And that's good. I'm for that. That's not a bad thing, of course. But simultaneously, he's approving 40 fracking wells. A groundswell from the ground up needs to say, this can't continue. The lip service isn't good enough. Being the Ministry of Appeasement on Twitter is not good enough. And that's why we need to elect people-powered candidates who are actually going to walk the walk.
Yeah. And that's very of the utmost importance. And I know that a lot of candidates, even in the establishment, I mean, those who are incumbents, they're just signing on their names because it's politically expedient. It's you're part of the cool crowd and you want to stay in there, but they're really not fighting for it. They don't really care about it. It wasn't until I know that local grassroots groups here, like Sunrise Movement LA, really pushed officials like my opponent to co-sponsor it, and then they did. And so I think it's from a ground up, bottoms up, and this is where our action doesn't just end at voting, but it continues even past it. So for those like, yes, it's great that we're voting, and I'm so happy for those who casted their vote for the first time or who are voting again. But we need to show up, whether it be at different protests, whether it be at different forums, discussions, tweeting, engaging in discussions online, tuning into platforms like this, and really increasing the awareness, because I think right now a lot of people, they're kept in this harsh cycle of life of trying to make ends meet, that they're not able to have the time to think about things and to do things. And I'm not saying, and that's the reality of it all. And so it's our job to really inform each other, to connect with each other, to talk about these things with our families and communities, because our government's not talking about it, and they won't talk about it unless we make them talk about it. And so, yeah, it's very important, and it's all interconnected. Again, I feel that the government controls people through poverty, and that's one of the ways we need to overcome it. And it's all intersectional as well. Who does climate change affect the most? Those who are the poorest, in reality as well. Even it be with tree shade here in California, in Los Angeles, the richer neighborhoods have the most tree shade in Los Angeles, and so so in just every different way, I think it's just very important for us to be aware of what's going on in different areas of our lives, because politics is flushing the bathroom. Politics is when you turn on your light. Politics is when you don't know how to figure out how to pay rent or pay for your bills. And so I think this reality is something that's hitting us more and more, especially our generation, because we have it worse than the ones before. Again, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but again, I'm coming in saying, no, let's bring positive change. Well, no. And that's what I'll be bringing to DC. So.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with, I don't think it makes you a Debbie Downer to, point out realities when your overall message is, we can fight this thing and we can win.
Yeah.
That's not being a Debbie Downer. That's just being honest about the task ahead. And I think that's something that's very much missing in our politics for a long list of reasons that we've really summarized in this interview. But there's a being honest about the task ahead is gravely missing. And then when they decide to be quote unquote honest, they're not being honest. Whenever they try to be quote Debbie Downers, they're just lying. We can't afford Medicare for all. That's just a lie. That's just not true. Even if you just factor in the resources we already have, we spend more than Medicare for all will cost.
We spend more per capita than any other
Yeah.
developed country, and we
Yeah.
have a higher mortality rate still,
Yes.
regardless.
So it's
Yeah.
like that's just a lie. Whenever they're saying, "Oh, we can't supply Social Security," that's just a lie. They dip into
Mhm,
Social Security to fund other things.
mhm,
Whenever they rag on the postal service, that's just a lie. That's just a
yeah.
lie because guess what? It's not called the postal business. It's called the postal service. So it
Mhm,
really doesn't matter if they're not financially sustainable, which by the way, they actually are. That's a freaking
mhm,
lie too. But even if they weren't, it's a government service. As long as they're doing the service they're supposed to do, which they do, and as
mhm,
long as people are getting paid a salary, which they are, and who is getting those salaries? Americans,
mhm,
freaking Americans, who then go spend it. So
mhm,
the only time they're ever honest about the task ahead is when they're lying, is when they're bullshitting. They're
mhm,
not honest in the way you were just honest, where you just
mhm,
said, look, this is what's in front of us.
mhm,
It is a big task. It's a tall glass of water, pun
mhm,
intended, because we need to save the water.
mhm.
But but you know, that's just being real. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just being authentic. But so you talked about looking outside of electoral politics as well, which transitions us into something I wanted to share with you to get your news on with me a little bit. This is Chris Smalls. Do you know who Chris Smalls is?
No, I do
Off the
not.
top of your head. So he organized the Wildcat strike at Amazon in the Staten Island location. He
Mm,
was, I think he might have been the manager of that particular warehouse, but he was one of the warehouse workers. I forget his exact title off the top of my head, but he, people were coming to work with COVID, and he showed up, and he, first of all, he sent those workers home. Nobody above him would do it. He did it. And he said, look, we need to be provided with proper sanitation, and we need to know when workers have COVID, and they can't be coming to work when they have COVID. They need to be given paid leave. And
mhm,
of course, that was way too much of an ask, way too much of an ask. So he started organizing strikes, and he lost his job for organizing the strike that he organized. So he became a straight up organizer. Here's what he has to say about what's going to happen on election day.
So I had the pleasure to join them in solidarity today, join in these movements, the labor movement, the social injustice movement, the environmental movement. That is true solidarity. Calling for a general strike on election day. The reason why we want a general strike on election day is so that we are focused on just getting the right administration in there. But if Biden and Camilla, if y'all think y'all gonna get in office and do lip service for 4 years, hell no. Nope, we gonna shut shit down. Shut it down.
So that's Chris Smalls. And my reason for sharing this is calling for a general strike on election day. Now, I am a stan for general strike. I'm all for it. I think it is absolutely mandatory. I think it is mandatory no matter what happens in November. I think no matter what, whether it's Trump or Biden, a general strike is still absolutely 1000% necessary, because neither one of them is offering the systemic change we need or anywhere close to it. And, you know, you don't need to sugarcoat either one of them to come to grips with that reality. So, you know, I'm not going to tell anybody what they need to do, but I will say no matter what happens, a general strike, it needs to happen.
yeah, there's many people that have no relief, haven't had relief since the beginning of the pandemic, even before the pandemic. And to think that our Congress doesn't deliberate or grant relief to the people right now, but ram in a justice for the Supreme Court. It really makes you think, huh? Why isn't there a general strike? Why aren't the people being enraged? And I think this is that time to do that, and I'm supportive of it. I mean, I've participated before, but it's very important, I think, for those that just watch the video, not to just take it lightly. Talk about it within your own communities. And I know there's probably, I did see other groups, I think, that were also starting to advocate and push for that as well. But yeah, it's right now, it's the time for the people to really, I think one of the biggest things I've learned, Ron, during this campaign season, during the past 16 months, is is I have a voice to talk with you and to speak and to articulate my words and opinions and my thoughts and my vision and to deliver that and communicate that to you. And I think we've forgotten how to do that as the people. We've forgotten how to do that individually, like to the very basics of like, even when our parents tell us, hey, if there's a bully at school or whoever, like speak up and stand up for yourself. Like we're not doing that for ourselves individually in our own relationships, interpersonally, and we're not doing that collectively as communities, collectively as people, to the government as well. We've lost it. And so I think this is that time where we need to really find ourselves, who we are, identified with the power that we have, connect with that and realize, hey, yes, there's all these thoughts that go up here, these reactiveness and the fight, flight, or freeze mode that we're always in, because the government keeps us in that fight, flight, or freeze mode constantly, that sympathetic mode, because we're always in that reactionary mode, making these decisions. But imagine what it would be like if we were always operating in this responsive mode and not struggled down by poverty, not struggled down by jobs. And so I think it's definitely a new time for the people to recognize that and to really, really speak up, and not just for platitudes or cliches.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, when I call for a general strike, I also recognize, I mean, you're saying, well, why aren't people doing it? I mean, I recognize it's way easier said than done. And I recognize that's by design. It's by design that so many people in this country are one paycheck away from going under. So they can't wrap their heads around the idea of striking. Like, yeah, I would love to strike, but I have children to feed. And I am just one paycheck away from having to choose between rent or groceries. I can't, and I get that. But you know, somehow, and I think the only solution is through like extensive mutual aid. I mean, somehow we got to overcome that, because it's got to happen. And I've always said, I'm like, look, I'm a comedian who streams a show out of his living room and talks to a cat. The strike doesn't apply to me. So I'll do anything I can help as a communication vehicle. How can I help? What can I do to be helpful in making a general strike a reality? I want to do it, whether it's showing up at the protest, which I've been doing, or whether it's just using this communication vehicle to help on the administrative end. I want to do it. I'm ready, but I don't know exactly how to do that. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Someone who is better at that than I am needs to tell the rest of us what to do. And I know that's a heavy order, but some groups got to do it.
Yeah, and I think and no, I agree. I totally understand, Ron, what you just shared, and I think it really comes down to again, the reality of people are living paycheck to paycheck or don't have money, and so or have so many dependents and obligations to fulfill, and they're not able to, and so it's this kind of, and that's why we're always stuck in this harsh cycle of things, like where we can never get out of it, because of those reasons stated. And so I think for us, like for those who are wanting to like connect with your local orgs first, talk about it with them, because and this is where that community trust comes in. And I'm so grateful for our Los Angeles grassroots organizations community, whether that be with like Ground Game LA, K-Town for All, all the People City Council, all the different ones out there, because they'll talk with you and they'll connect with you and provide you and lead you to resources. And so for those who are thinking of participating, talk with your local orgs first, and trusted community, grassroots people that are working day in and day out, and connect with them first and see where you can participate, whether that be in general strike or protest or in other ways that you can do it. So,
well, I think one place of optimism that you and I both share big time, and has been an overarching theme throughout the hour, has been, you know, one glimmer of hope is that these grassroots organizations, cause-based initiatives, folks like you running for office, they're all starting to talk more so than, and I don't mean like literal, they're tweeting each other, what's up? I mean, they're starting to organize together. That was not happening 4 years ago, at least not to this extent. And that is a reason for hope, because when that happens, you got a real movement that can't be ignored. David, where can people go to learn more about you and to help out with your campaign?
Yes. So if you want to phone bank or text bank and you don't live in LA, that's great. You can still do it remotely. Phone bank, davidkim2020.com/phone bank, text bank /text bank. And then if you do live in LA, come talk with me. I'd love to get to know you. We'll sine wave at an intersection, do some fun stuff, waving to people who are honking and cheering us on. And that link is davidkim2020.com/ground game. And then you can also read about our campaign, what we're fighting for, and then also donate there too.
Thank you very much. Jason, thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. You keep Get Your News On with Ron on the air. Jason says, my UBI is going to Ron this month. And then you tell me, be careful on how you say bottoms up approach, because in San Fernando Valley, that has a whole other meaning. I will keep that in mind, Jason. Thank you. And thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. You help keep this show on the air. I appreciate it very much. Go to davidkim2020.com. Check out David's campaign and how you can help out. Guys, quick announcement. We will be back for a full live stream on Monday officially at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And our guest is actually going to be Liam O'Mara, a colleague of yours.
Yes.
Liam is going to be the guest on Monday. We're going to talk to him about he's running for Congress, correct?
Correct.
Another congressional candidate. So we've been covering as many candidates as we can, as it is a week before the election. And there's a good chance I'm going to be popping up between now and then. It's election season in full throttle. So we'll be having some pop-up streams. So keep your eye on the YouTube feed. Keep your eye on my Twitter. If you're not following me, of course, it's at Ron Placone. And in the meantime, check out davidkim2020.com, and we'll see you Monday. A short video drops tomorrow, per usual. There's a short video every Thursday. And it's actually going to be a little bit from my stand-up set that I did at Flappers to an empty club. I know it's weird I'm publishing stand-up from an empty club, but here's the deal. People have been publishing pandemic stand-up, so it is a thing now. And also, it's election material, so it's not going to be usable in a week. So I might as well get it out there. But anyway, davidkim2020.com. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Ron.
I'll see you guys again Monday. In the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace.